Hello, my name is Ali Al-Dakhani, and today I'll be talking to you about the 5 transformational policies for a sustainable world that were created by Rockstrom and his group at Stockholm Resilience Center. The first transformational policy they talk about is rapid renewable energy growth. They are saying that the world needs to halve its emissions from fossil fuels every decade starting from 2020. And the way they're going to do this is that they're going to have countries introduce laws such as the carbon law. What the carbon law does is it gives the power to the countries and governments to tell certain companies and corporations you can't build or produce these products that will essentially create a huge carbon footprint. And an example of this would be if a certain car company wanted to produce a new car, but you know that it needs a lot of fossil fuels to do it, that country could stop that car company from making that car. Another way they're going to do it is they're going to shift to new energy sources like wind and solar power. They're going to have more solar panels and more windmills, and these energy sources are much more reliable and sustainable for our planet. The second transformational policy they talk about is accelerated sustainable food chains. They are saying that we are going to need to feed 10 billion people by 2050. And one way we're going to do it is by having sustainable agriculture. People are going to start shifting their diets to more plant-rich foods, which lowers the share of meat per person. And when you do this, you're also having better water management because it takes less water to produce a plant-based diet rather than a meat-based diet. A third transformational policy is the new development models in poor countries. They are trying to get these poor countries to flourish economically. And one way they're going to do it is by introducing the Chinese model. The Chinese model is the one which prescribes policies such as macroeconomic stabilization, rapid economic opening with respect to both trade, finance, and investment. And in addition to this, they'll have the expansion of market forces within the domestic economy. And when they're doing this, they're really increasing investment because these poor countries can't go on their own. They're going to need help. And when you increase investment, you are strengthening institutions and you're allowing for early stages of industrial development. The fourth transformational policy is active inequality reduction. They're trying to ensure that the richest 10% take no more than 40% of the income. Now, increasingly, both rich and poor countries face the need to reduce growing unemployment and inequity, and a push for fair wages and a more progressive taxation of income succeeds at redistributing total output. This means that the wealth will be more distributed among the people, which will definitely lead to less poverty and more people being to live a decent life. Now, as well to this, also, by shortening the work year, it also creates and shares more jobs. The fifth transformational policy is they're trying to have a huge investment for education and all. Not just for education, but also for gender equality, health, and family planning to stabilize the world's population. Now, how are they going to do this? They're going to have more women in leadership roles. When you have that, you have more women become empowered to take positions in certain workplaces because there's more powerful women in the world. And as well to this, they're going to have global funds that focus on education, especially for women that are strengthened. I have talked to you about the 5 transformational policies. I'll be going more in depth into one specifically, rapid renewable energy growth. I'll be talking about how when you enforce this policy, you will be accomplishing some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, just to refresh your memory, this policy entails more renewable sources of energy, enforcing policies such as a carbon law, and ideas such as shifting investments in fossil fuels. Now, these are some of the sustainable development goals that we will be accomplishing by enforcing this policy. The first one is no poverty. You might not see the connection initially, but when you give people access to more safe and clean energy, it creates a true energy democracy. It provides better access to lighting, education, clean water, and communications. Now, another one is number 8, decent work and economic growth. it costs less money to create renewables than it does to create fossil fuels, which then essentially creates economic growth. If you look here, on average, onshore wind schemes are now costing an average of only 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Also, solar PV is down to 10 cents per kilowatt hour, while fossil fuels can cost up to 17 cents per kilowatt hour. And then what this does is that it also accomplishes number 9. You have better industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Better infrastructure because you're producing renewables that are much more efficient, reliable, and more sustainable. And then this connects to number 11, sustainable cities and communities. When you have less pollution in there, less carbon dioxide in the air that people are breathing in, you have a more sustainable city. Now, the biggest one is number 13, climate action. With this policy, what you're going to have is you're going to have global carbon emissions fall from 30 gigatons of equivalent carbon dioxide in 2015 to only 20 in 2030 and just 6 gigatons of carbon dioxide in 2050. That is a massive improvement. And this directly connects us to the 9 limits of planet Earth. Two of the main limits are global warming and ozone depletion. When you are producing less carbon dioxide into our stratosphere, less greenhouse gases into our stratosphere, you're not only stopping global warming from occurring, which we're trying to stop now so that our future generations don't have to deal with it, we're also stopping the ozone from depleting. We're keeping the ozone structure intact, which is very, very crucial and important. Now, positives of this policy. Clearly the reduction in carbon emissions. I mean, you have less carbon going into the stratosphere, like I discussed before, which stops global warming. And then renewables start delivering higher profitability than fossil fuels. Nearly all investments in fossil fuels are going to be shifted to renewables and power infrastructure during the 2020s. And the higher investments are driven by both a combination of demand side pull, as renewables will start delivering higher profitability than fossils, and a government push through tougher regulations. And then natural resources can be replenished during an average human lifetime. It sometimes takes millions upon millions of years to reuse fossil fuels, while it can only take approximately maybe like 80 or 90 years to reuse natural resources, which is clearly much more efficient and sustainable for planet Earth. Now, to every good plan, there are also some costs. Renewable energy isn't as efficient. What I mean by this is that you need more renewable energy to produce the same outcome that less fossil fuels could do. Expensive to transfer to renewable energy. Now, I did say that you create more profit by using renewable energy, which is most definitely true. But to transfer society from using fossil fuels to renewable energy is going to cost some money. It's going to cost some money to change some people's minds and to change corporations' minds and to enforce regulations to make that transfer. And then the third one, and probably the worst one out of them all, is lots of people lose their jobs. I mean, you have over 900,000 people in just the US working with fossil fuels, and all those people will essentially lose their jobs if you're shifting to more renewable-based source of energy. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something from that presentation. This is my works cited.